Remember, remember, the 13th of November. So, as the Wrath of the Lich King expansion slowly winds to a close, I thought it'd be a cool idea to take a look back over the tiers of raid content that were released in this expansion, and kind of take a look at what new ideas and new concepts were presented from the developers, what kind of new stuff they threw at us being the raiding player base, and what kind of lessons they've learned from those new ideas and new concepts that they were trying out. Over this whole expansion, we've seen a lot of changes to the raiding game, not just in terms of coming up with new ways to challenge the players and new sort of encounter ideas, but also just in the way things have been handled mechanically. I guess let's go ahead and start with Naxxramas and Tier 7 content. Naxxramas itself, there really wasn't a whole lot I think you can say that they really learned from Naxxramas. There wasn't really, it was a level 60 dungeon that was pretty much just retuned for level 80 and 10 or 25 players instead. One thing, probably the only thing you can say they really learned from that dungeon was how well their 10 and 25 split was actually working out, and I think it worked pretty well. The other two bosses that were released in that same tier of content, though, which are Malygos and Sartharion, had some very, very interesting implications and concepts that you can see as they move forward into encounters like the ones in Ulduar, that actually held a lot of useful information for them as developers. For example, on Malygos, one of the most important things I think that they learned from the Malygos encounter was that having your encounter require radically different mechanics from what players are used to in the final phase of a fairly long fight with no real way to get used to those up until that point is kind of obnoxious. I'm talking specifically about the Drake mechanic. There was that daily right there near the Nexus area, I guess you could call it, but it didn't really prepare players for the experience, and it was kind of just, you get to phase 3 finally and you've just been thrown into this thing and you have no idea what's going on whatsoever, and all your buttons are different, and you wipe, and it takes you several wipes even to just to figure out what you're supposed to be doing, even with like a video guide to sort of guide you through the whole thing. So that was kind of a mess, and they didn't do anything like that again. There was the introduction leading up to basically the Flame Leviathan encounter and all the trash ahead of it in Ulduar, but that was kind of different because you at least got to sit in the vehicle and you had this long trash clear to kind of get an idea of what all you were capable of. So there's a lesson learned from that. Also, the Sartharion encounter. I think the really big thing they learned there was, hey, hard modes are kind of interesting. It was really a new idea that they were presenting, and having this sort of tougher way to kill the boss. Well, I don't want to say completely new idea. They had experimented with that a little bit back in even as early as AQ40 with the bug trio. With if you killed them in a different order, you'd get different drops, and some of them were considered better drops and considered worse drops. But by killing them in this different order, you were making the encounter harder and being rewarded differently for it. I think Sartharion really showed them that they could take that and make that a more standard mechanic of finding these ways to make the encounter more challenging for the hardcore crowd and also reward them more. So that's a big thing that they learned there. So moving on from there, we get into Ulduar. Now the first thing that immediately pops into my mind when I think of Ulduar is, hey, almost every encounter has a hard mode. Now, the way they implemented it in Ulduar is a lot different than the ways they implemented it in future instances, meaning basically it was just doing the encounter but making it harder on yourself was the way that you actually did the hard modes. In a few cases that worked really, really well. On XT, it was pretty straightforward and simple. Either you kill the heart or you don't. On Iron Council, it was which order you chose to kill things in. On Thorum, it was how fast you got through the hallway and whether or not you chose to pull the boss at that point. On Memoron, it was basically, did you push the button or not? Just pretty straightforward stuff. And then on Vezax, it was, do you break any of the, what do they call it? Serenite Vapors, I guess is what they were called. Those were all pretty straightforward and simple. Now, where they ran into some problems were on the other hard modes, especially in conjunction with the Conqueror of Ulduar achievement. to not die on every fight in there. So on Flame Leviathan, if you kill all 4 towers because you're going for the Conqueror of Ulduar achievement, and then someone dies anyway, you can't say, okay, well, let's wipe it and do 4 tower. It just made it really, really annoying to go for that no-death kill when you were still at the point where, maybe you're getting a couple of deaths on each 4 tower kill. Let's see. Hodier's was really annoying. I was in one of the guilds, so my guild is one of the guilds that had that really, really annoying, basically getting robbed out of our first hard mode kill because he was casting his, I forget what it's called, his big deep freeze thing while we brought him to 0% health. So we actually finished him before the timer was up. But since he was casting that spell, he wouldn't actually go into his "I've completed" or "You've completed the fight, have been defeated" little speech that he did until he finished casting that spell, and the timer ticked over in the meantime. So that was just, that was horrible. And even if you didn't get hit by that particular problem, you could very, very easily push him over. You get to that point. He breaks the rare cache of Hodier, and then dots tick and kill the boss afterwards. You can't just say, okay, we missed it, let's stop. Kind of annoying. And then Freya had a similar problem to Flame Leviathan, just kind of the opposite one, that once you've killed all the elders because you're trying to get the... no, it was actually the same as Flame Leviathan. It was Yogg-Saron that was the other way around, where if you pull all of the guys down because you want to get the Conqueror of Ulduar achievement, you can't tell them to leave again. So I think that's why they went, when they moved into Trial of the Crusader, they went with the, well, either you are in the heroic mode of the instance or you're not approach. So then in Trial of the Crusader, not a whole lot to say about that instance just because it was kind of short, but there were a few key things that they tried out in that instance that we can then later see extensions of that in Icecrown. First of all, this is the first instance where you are spending badges for your tier tokens. They didn't get it quite perfect in the Trial of the Crusader setup, but I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The second thing you see is a more flat and hard distinction between what is a hard mode and a normal mode encounter. They actually started calling it normal and heroic mode there. So for Icecrown, they basically took the system that they set up in Trial of the Crusader and they just refined it. They tightened it up a little bit. So instead of having 2 completely separate lockouts of the instance, you just have a normal and heroic mode that you switch on and off on basically a per encounter basis. And instead of spending all of your badges on the lower tier version of a piece of gear and then having those badges all be wasted because as soon as you get a token then you've got to spend badges again, instead what they did was they made it so you buy the lower tier version of it, you get a token, you upgrade that version into the middle tier, and then you get another token that upgrades that into the highest tier version. So you never feel like I should save my badges and not get this right now even though it's an upgrade, because you're going to have to get it anyway. So I think where they ran into problems in Icecrown, first of all, a combination of the gated progression and the fact that you had to kill the Lich King before you could actually open the hard modes. Because the hard modes weren't available from the start, and they had the same problem in Trial of the Crusader, but because the hard modes weren't available from the start, the really hardcore progression guilds, who are the ones that had already cleared everything from the previous contents and were just kind of sitting around going, okay, well, we'd really love some new content to be able to do something right now. The really hardcore progression guilds just really didn't have much to do in Icecrown for the first few weeks, for the first couple of months actually. So that was kind of rough, I think. I would have liked one or the other, I believe. Either make it so you have to kill the Lich King first, or make it so you can get to the hard modes right away from the start. And then the other problem I think they had is they still had a little bit of trouble with the badge system the way it was working. Especially early on, because you needed Frost badges no matter what for your tier sets. Pretty much everybody was trying to run, even if you weren't in a 25-man hardcore raiding guild, you were trying to pug as much of the 25-man as you could. And then also run 10-man, and then also do your random daily every day, and then also do the raid weekly. And you just had all this stuff that you wanted to do that wasn't the new content, more or less. Neither one of those really worked perfectly, I don't think. Fortunately, Blizzard seems to agree with that. There was a recent post by, I believe it was Ghostcrawler, it was a recent post saying that they weren't terribly excited. They're probably going to continue gating progression, the way it was, but they weren't terribly excited about the way it worked out by restricting the hard modes initially. They want to be able to let the hardcore guilds, and I hope this is actually what he was trying to say in his post, because it can be kind of hard to tell sometimes, but they want the hardcore guilds to be able to get into those hard modes right away, so there actually is a challenge there for them, which is awesome. And then with the point system, the way they're changing the badge system into the point system, which if you haven't read up on that yet, you probably should. It's pretty important. But the way they're changing the badges into the point system, and the fact that there's a cap on how many you can earn per week, depending on what they set that cap at, can make it a lot so you don't really have to feel obliged to go and run the same content 3 or 4 times over in a given week just to be able to get everything you need. Okay, so once again I have completely run out of time, so I'm gonna have to cut this off there. Thanks everybody for watching, and be sure to check back next week for another weekly Marmot. See you later.